In this section, we're going to discuss soil pollutants and their effects. What is soil pollution? Soil pollution, or contaminated land, occurs when soil is chemically altered in its natural environment. There are several types and causes of soil pollution. Each type poses environmental and health hazards. Soil pollution is most commonly caused by industrialization, agricultural chemicals, and waste. Soil pollution occurs as the result of intentional or accidental activities. It also occurs when natural events further disturb contaminated land. Another source of soil pollution is poor sanitation and dumping of sewage. This can lead to the growth of biological pollutants, including bacteria, fungi, viruses, and allergens. Other common examples of sources of soil pollution include oil spills, acid rain, corrosion of metallic wastes underground, mining, and waste disposal of sewage, dumping, coal ash, and electronic wastes. Industrialization. In developed countries, industrialization has historically been a major source of soil pollution. Developed countries now have regulations to reduce the environmental impact of industry. In countries that are developing, industrial activities are often unregulated. Factories in industrialized nations require large amounts of energy and produce lots of waste. Coal has been and still is a major source of energy. Coal is burned to provide heat that can be used for ore smelting or metal production, cement production, chemical production, and generating electricity. When coal is burned, heavy metals such as zinc are concentrated in its ash, along with polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons, PAHs, chemicals that are known to cause cancer. The coal ash with these chemicals, if not disposed of properly, will become part of the soil. PCBs. Polychlorinated biphenyls, PCBs, are large organic compounds that were once manufactured to be used as electrical insulators and coolants in electrical apparatuses, such as transformers. They were also used to make plastics more flexible, added to paint to make it dry softer and less brittle, and as a coating on bridges, water tanks, and other pieces of infrastructure. PCBs were desired for their stability, low flammability, and insulation properties. Prior to the 1960s, they were produced globally and 1.2 million tons were produced. Manufacturing has since been banned after the toxic effects of PCBs were discovered. However, they are still in use today. PCBs are now present in the soil in many countries all over the world. Industrial accidents. Every year, there are thousands of accidental spills of oil, gas, and other chemicals. These spills happen during transportation of these chemicals or are accidentally spilled from the facilities where they are processed. The worst accident involving radioactive waste happened in 1986 when the Chernobyl nuclear power plant in Ukraine had a meltdown. 30 people died and radioactive material was released into the soil. To this day, the area is uninhabitable by humans, although animals such as lynx, bison, and deer have returned. Another major accident was the Bhopal disaster, occurring in India in 1984. A gas leak exposed 500,000 people to methyl isocyanate, MIC, a highly toxic gas. At least 3,787 people died, and possibly over 16,000. Soil and water were polluted with toxic levels of heavy metals and pesticides. Agricultural chemicals. Common agricultural chemicals include herbicides, which kill weeds, pesticides, which kill pests, fungicides, which kill fungus, and insecticides, which kill insects. All of these chemicals are used to kill organisms that compete with humans for food. While these chemicals are helpful for farmers to preserve their crops, high concentrations of these chemicals can cause short and long-term health effects. When high concentrations of these chemicals are in water and soil, they become part of the food chain and have effects on animals and the ecosystem. Effects of soil pollution. There are many health and environmental effects of soil pollution. Some of these effects are noticeable and immediate, while others have long-term consequences that are not immediately obvious. Some contaminated sites are not a concern for health or environmental hazards because the level of contaminants in the soil is very low. Other areas are more concerning if the contamination level is high and the contaminants are able to persist and/or move through the environment. Soils that are contaminated can leach toxic chemicals into groundwater or nearby lakes and streams. These chemicals are then taken up by plants or animals, contaminate drinking water, and can later vaporize and be breathed in by people or animals. Biomagnification. Biomagnification refers to the increasing concentration of a toxin within the tissues of organisms when they eat other organisms with the toxin. The toxin becomes more concentrated as it moves through the food chain. In the image, the toxin is represented by a plus sign. You can see as we go from grass to mouse to snake to hawk, the level of the toxin becomes more and more concentrated. Here's another example of biomagnification. We have a lake that becomes toxic because of some toxic waste. The fish in the lake become toxic because they ingest toxic plankton from the lake. Then, the animal that eats the fish has an even higher level of the toxin. And through this food chain transfer, the toxin here causes the top consumer to become intoxicated and ultimately die. Biomagnification starts when toxins enter the food chain through small organisms that take it in from contaminated soil or water. These toxins are slowly metabolized or broken down within these organisms. So, when the smaller organisms are consumed by the larger ones, the toxin is consumed as well and is concentrated in the larger organisms. Dichlorodiphenyl trichloroethane, or DDT, is a toxin that biomagnifies. This insecticide, once widely used in protecting crops, is now banned in many countries. Other toxins that biomagnify include PCBs and heavy metals such as mercury. Here's an example of DDT biomagnification from algae up through several water creatures and ultimately to humans. DDT starts at 0.04 parts per million in algae, and as the zooplankton consume the algae, the small fish consume the zooplankton, the large fish consumes the small fish, and then ultimately humans consume the large fish. The level of DDT in humans rises to over 13 parts per million, a harmful level. As the tropic level increases in the food chain, a higher amount of toxins are present. Health effects of soil pollution. Human health is affected when people are directly exposed to soil contaminants, when the contaminants have vaporized and are breathed in, or when contaminants have been leached into groundwater and consumed. Human health is also affected indirectly by biomagnification of toxins that entered soil and water and are taken up into the food chain. If humans are exposed to high concentrations of DDT, symptoms include vomiting, tremors, and seizures. Animal studies have shown that DDT is a carcinogen, or that it causes cancer. Humans are affected by soil pollution when contaminants infiltrate into groundwater and that groundwater is consumed. Chronic exposure to heavy metals such as lead may possibly cause cancer. Lead poisoning is especially a concern for children because it has severe effects on mental and physical development. A high exposure to lead can be fatal. Chronic exposures to agricultural chemicals, including herbicides and pesticides, are also known to be carcinogenic, as seen in animal studies. They may cause liver and kidney damage and have effects on reproduction.